It is not every day we hear other people's personal stories, whether it is about their distant past with family members and loved ones. In this edition of our program entitled My Story, our guest was born in Puerto Rico, spent her childhood in New York City. At this lakeside location, Michelle Valentin Neves and I took a stroll around the environment to reflect on her personal story growing up in the city. The frequent arrest and incarceration of blacks and people of color prompted her to take on activism.
What's the history of how and where did you start doing activism?
Thank you, Ibrahima. So I started doing activism with my brother. So it really started mainly with my family. So my brother joined at that time an organization called the Party for Socialism and Liberation, formerly known as the PSL. And with that, we started doing a lot of rallies and protests. So a lot of times I would do rallies and protests with my brother for things such as things that affect us in our neighborhoods and urban communities that mostly have a lot of African Americans, immigrants, Latinos, or people of color. A lot of things pertaining to discrimination by the police and abuse by the police, or discrimination in the workplace, or abuse towards women. So these are things that we were really involved in for many years. Myself and my brother would do it often. We would go to meetings, we would go to rallies, protests, and just discuss the things that were affecting us in our neighborhoods, particularly the relationships between us, the community, and the NYPD at that time. In the early 2000s, it was a very stressed out time, and there's been a lot of issues between our communities and the NYPD. Also, a lot of discrimination happening, like in colleges and in schools and things like that, where we feel like we're just not getting the opportunities like other people are in other communities are getting opportunities. Things like, let's say there's like 30 alcohol stores to buy alcohol, and then there's only one library. Or there'll be, a lot of people just hanging out in certain areas, and, sometimes there's just behavior going on there that causes the police to treat everyone in the neighborhood the same way. And there was a lot of criminalizing of myself, my brother. My brother growing up, he was stopped by the police numerous times. Sometimes coming home from school, sometimes walking home with his friends. The NYPD would just stop him and question him, where are you going? Uh, what's your name? What's your ID? For anything. So these are the reasons why we decided to start to get into activism, along with the other things that happened, with my brother and my parents.
Is this related to racism or racial profiling or anything that has to do with targeted identity? I mean, what was the factor?
Um, the factor, I believe, is that we grew up in a very poor neighborhood. So at that time, we were raised when we came from Puerto Rico. We moved to East Harlem, and at that time, in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, there was a lot of conflict between the residents of East Harlem and the NYPD, specifically if you're a person of color. That would be, African American, biracial, indigenous, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, all types of people of color living in a certain neighborhood. And we noticed that a lot of times, mainly my brother would be targeted. I'm more fairer skinned than my brother is. My brother's more of a brown skin complexion, so he would get targeted often. And we noticed that the police will also target young males. So it would be young males, sometimes 12, 13, 14 years of age, that just happen to be a dark complexion or a brown skin complexion, and the police would just stop them randomly. And this is a behavior that we noticed in our neighborhood. If we went to another neighborhood that was predominantly, let's say, Caucasian neighborhood, we would get looked at strangely for even walking in that neighborhood. So if you were in your neighborhood or if you went to another neighborhood that didn't have people that look like us or have, black and brown people, you would often be stopped by the police at that time. It was a very, very big problem.
Some people say joining or being activist is addictive. Like once you hooked up, it's difficult for you to let go. How do you find it? What gains do you have in doing activism?
So activism, I think it is very addictive, because it's like freedom work. It really is, because it frees your thinking, and it opens up your mind to the possibilities that there's outside influences just affecting the way that you live your life, affecting your quality of life, where you work, where you go to school, where do you live, where do you buy your food, where do you hang out, where your family lives, where your friends are. So it really opens up your mind to thinking that there's certain issues and things happening in the society that affects your quality of life. And through activism, we can talk about it and see the things that we can work on as a community to improve our quality of life with everything, our work, our education, and the way that we live.
Okay. Now let's talk about experience sharing. You work as an activist, and at the same time you do a lot of activism. What experience do you have to share with others who want to be activists or wants to join, like the women's activist movement you are joining, or other, whether it's political affiliation or community relations? What experience do you have to share with them?
Sometimes I think that it's really good to apply your life experiences. A lot of times, people will say that it's good to read books on class struggles and class struggle activism, where a lot of times, sometimes our own life is a class struggle, especially if you're raised very, very poor, or if you're a person of color, or if you come from a certain background. So I think it's good to use your own life experiences. Uh, let's say like myself, I have a partner, and my partner, he was wrongfully convicted of a double homicide. So he just happens to be a brown-skinned Puerto Rican man. And with no evidence, no DNA evidence, no witnesses, he was convicted of a double homicide, and he was sentenced 50 years to life, and he was wrongfully imprisoned for 20 years of his life. This is my partner, and we've been together for almost 15 years now. And something like that is a real life experience that you experience in real life. You don't have to read about it in a book or study it or write a novel about it. Sometimes it's something that happened in your real life that may have left some trauma or some type of pain, and you're able to use that real life experience to talk to people and try to see, how we can prevent something like that from happening ever again, right? We don't want a person, just because they look like you or they look like me, to be convicted of a crime that did they not do, and then they spend 20 years of their life in prison. We don't want that to happen. We don't want things like that to happen. So we want to be able to correct our mistakes and not keep doing those same things over and over and over again. And I think that we can prevent that through activism.
Okay. Now from activism or experience sharing, let's move into family relations. You happily married. You have kids, and you still work. Your 9 to 5 job. How do you maintain the balance between family life or family relation and job and activism?
So the simple way for me to do it is to just turn off the electronics. This is a way that I've been able to do it, where I will turn the phone off, I will turn the computer off, and I will start a conversation with my daughter or with my husband or with my mother or with my brother, a phone call, or we can go somewhere together, so that I'm able to spend the same time with my family as I am with individuals that I'm not related to, that I spend a lot of time with. And I think it's really important because my activism actually came through with my family. It was with my family that I experienced the first desire to do activism, even as a younger child, even as a teenager. I would recognize situations that I just did not agree with, and I would ask myself, well, why is this way? Why is this person being treated this way and another person is being treated a different way? What is the difference between these two people? And for me, that is the way that I do it. I just turn off the electronics. Sometimes the electronics, it consumes a lot of time, and sometimes you get caught up, on the phone, WhatsApp chats, emails, Facebook, social media, Twitter, things that are happening here, things that are happening there. So that's the way that I do it. I would just put the phone down or the laptop down and say, okay, this is family time. Or sometimes I'll even write it down in a calendar to keep track of what it is that I'm doing. And I'll make sure that I'm committing a certain amount of days or hours just spending time with my family, whoever that may be, because I have different people in my family that I spend time with.
Um, what about activism? Does it interfere in your quality time with your family?
It did. It did, especially with the activism that I was doing with my job. It was taking a lot of time because I would be doing the hours of my job, and then I would stay behind and do another hour, 2 hours of just activism with the work that I was doing inside of my job. So it was taking a lot of time away from my family and from my relationships. And the good thing is that I have a family that they're willing to communicate that with me. And that was made in communications, let's say with my daughter. Mom, we don't spend enough time together. Or my husband, we need to spend more time together. We need to do things together as husband and wife. You're spending a lot of time at work. You're spending a lot of time on the phone. And I want to be able to have a conversation with you and have some time to communicate, just us. And it's very, very difficult. But you just have to be aware of how much time it is that you're spending doing activism work or working, and how much time you're spending with your family and your loved ones and your personal relationships.
You said you've been in a relationship or married for 15 years. That brings me to the next and final topic of our discussion tonight. How do you, sustain that relationship? Nowadays, especially with the younger generation, marriages or relationship don't last long. Sometimes marriages, lavish marriages or wedding, we spend thousands and thousands of dollars or a fortune, but they don't last long. How did you make yours this long?
Well, we have a really good friendship. So besides, being joined together in a union, we're actually really, really good friends. So we also have a lot of things in common. So we both come from the same background. We had similar experiences growing up with, being intimidated by police and racism, and our parents experienced similar things. So I think that's really important when you have a similar background and a similar upbringing, and then you're also really, really good friends. And it's also good to have a sense of humor too. Sometimes we'll just have a conversation and we'll have a good sense of humor and a good laugh and a good joke, and it isn't always so serious. And just to try to do different things together or try to do new things together. like go bike riding or go to the movies or go to a museum, and always maintain a friendship. The friendship is the most important thing, I think, in a relationship, because you have to be able to talk to each other and have good communications, and of course respect.
Yeah, but despite all this, we see in the mainstream media, or I mean newspapers or TV or the tabloids, most of the time married couple, I mean, are compatible. They do all the stuff you mentioned here, but they don't last long. I mean, you don't seem to understand where is it coming from. So it's really confusing, so to speak, about how that happened, and then why others succeed and why others fail.
I think it goes down to the strength of the friendship, and the strength of having understanding and compassion and respect. I think that's where it really comes down to. Um, because if you're not able to just have a simple conversation and genuinely like each other as people, there's some people that they may be attracted to each other physically, but they don't really like the person as a person, their personality. It's like, this person has a great smile, or this person has beautiful eyes, but then when it comes to the conversation, I don't really like this person. We don't like the same movies. We don't like the same beliefs in politics. We don't have the same religious beliefs. We don't have the same background. So I think a lot of that comes into play too, to just have things in common and have a lot of respect and have a really, really good friendship and be able to have good conversation.
Well, I didn't hear you mention trust. I think trust is key here.
Yeah, trust also. Trust also. You have to know that you're not going to come home and find the apartment empty, right? That they cleaned out the TV, they cleaned out the closet. You come home and there's no furniture. You want to be able to have a trust with someone that you share a home with, and know that, we have an understanding and we have trust with each other, that I don't have to worry about coming home to an empty house, or he doesn't have to worry about coming home to an empty house and Michelle bought a plane ticket and disappeared, right? We have that understanding and trust that, we both come home, we speak to each other about each other's day, how each other's day went by. And that's very, very important to ask, how was your day? How do you feel? Is everything okay? Do you need anything? Are you hungry? Things like that. I think it's the simple things that matter in a relationship. It's not really about money or fancy gifts or a fancy car or a fancy house. I think it's the very, very simple things that will make the relationship last a longer time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ibrahima.